Check it out. It's the Laugh to Learn podcast. What is going on, everyone? My name is Jacob Paveo, and I need to readjust this microphone. I threw myself off. How is everyone doing this week? Welcome to the Laugh to Learn podcast, your weekly source for a fun spin on all the goings-on in the world. My name is Jacob Paveo, and I have been completely disconnected from the world for like the past about 2 weeks. So here's the vibe, okay? My company that I work for, that I never really talk about on the show for obvious reasons, was purchased. And so, of course, I am an accountant, which means I have had a lot of extra work to do. I knew about the purchase a few months ago, but it actually happened this past weekend. So there was a whole lot to do there. Plus, I am preparing for my final exam with CPA, the Chartered Professional Accountants Association. Essentially, it's an association. It's a membership board. And so I'm preparing to write that final exam at the end of May. And this weekend, on top of having the company purchased, was also the last in-class session where they're going over the exam and you have to attend and you learn nothing, but everyone goes there and smiles and pretends it's all good. So either way, because of all of this, I mean, I've been really removed from what's been going on in the world. And in preparing for this, everyone knows I don't like talking about things that I don't have a firm grip on, that I can't really provide some insight to. So reading about stuff starting a day or two ago, coming into today, you know, there's a few topics. Obviously, Russia pulled out of Kyiv, which is huge in the war in Ukraine, and they're focusing their attacks on the east. We kind of covered that last week, but now it has essentially happened in full. Plus, Ukraine launched an attack on Russia, in Russia. It seems, at least, that it was Ukraine that did it. When asked, they basically said, we can neither confirm or deny that it was us, which is the most hilarious thing in the world. And it's funny because people are like upset that they crossed the Russian border. The Russian government, you know, they're like, oh, how dare you come in here? And it's like, bro, you can't say shit. You went to them, so they're going to come to you. Anyways, there's not much to discuss there. But, of course, got to figure out an episode. So this week is going to be a fun one. If it's your first time here, thank you for tuning into the show. You can hit that subscribe button if you dig it. You can also reach me using the contact page at www.laughtolearnpodcast.com. If that's too much work, all the links for my social media accounts are down below. You know, you can get in touch with me. Let me know if you didn't like the show. What didn't you like about it? I may never respond to you, but I'll read what you say. If you're exceptionally rude, I probably won't respond. And I'll probably go, haha, good one, if it's a good joke. If it's not a good joke, I'll be like, you know, he's not going places. But either way, you can reach out to me at any time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It goes straight to my phone. If it's midnight on Christmas Eve, my phone will vibrate, because who uses a ringer anymore? Remember when we used to pay for ringtones? Holy fuck. I remember one time, I'm old, and this is what explains it. I remember getting paid. I used to work at hockey games here at a local hockey arena. And I remember getting my $20, because that's what I used to make every game. And there would be 2, sometimes 3 games a week. But, you know, I was like 13 or 12. And so, you know, 40 or 60 bucks a week was a lot of money. And I remember going and buying a prepaid credit card, which were like brand new at the time. They like, obviously now they're everywhere, but they were a brand new thing. And I had to go to the Max Milk, which is now, of course, Circle K here in Ontario. But the Max Milk near my house, I had to walk It was a long walk. It was about 45 minutes for me to walk there one way and then walk home to buy a prepaid card because I just told my parents like I'm going to Max, but I didn't want to tell them why, right? So I told them I'm going to go buy a slushie, and they were probably like, "You're a fucking loon! Like it's a 45-minute walk for a slushie, but go ahead." So I went to buy the prepaid card so that I could pay $7 for a ringtone. Now, here's where the story comes full circle. I did not plan for this story, but as I'm thinking right now, I thought, what was the ringtone? I completely remember. It was Hero of War, of course, by Rise Against. Now, the topic I'm going to discuss today is basically asking the question, is COVID really over? Are we through to the other side? Because tonight, I'm going to see Rise Against and Billy Talent play. So that's kind of funny that the ringtone I purchased for $7 before tax, by the way, because of course everything was taxed. I think it came to like just under $9 for a ringtone. And yeah, I ended up buying a lot of ringtones back in the day using those prepaid cards. And you had to buy $25 cards. They were the only increment you could get. So yeah, I don't know where I got the extra $5 from. I probably had it left over from the last game that I worked. But yeah, $7 for a ringtone. And nowadays, it's like my phone, if it makes any noise, I get like embarrassed. I actually like. I wonder sometimes when people have ringtones still, like you hear them every once in a while. You're in public and you hear like a ringtone. And sometimes it's a younger person. If it's an older person, like literally I understand it because like they need a louder ringtone or they just don't notice their phone is ringing. Like my father, if his phone was on vibrate, he would literally be like, I guess no one ever wants to talk to me. He would never ever look at his phone if it was on vibrate. So he has to have an exceptionally loud generic ringer, of course. But there are times still where someone has like a song that's currently on the radio and you're like walking through a store and you hear it and you're like, whoa, that dude actually set up a ringtone. Good for you. But yeah, those days are dead and gone. But nice transition because tonight, of course, as I said, I'm going to see Rise Against and Billy Talent with Maria Rogers, who's been on the podcast before. She is my expert that I bring on for issues of race, along with issues of homelessness and addiction, because that is it's actually her expertise. That's what she does for a living. But tonight we are going to a concert, so hyped about that. And yeah, but this is the first. So I studied music business before. I think I've probably mentioned it at some point in the past. And I used to go to shows. I mean, when I was working in the industry, I would go to like 3 or 4 shows a week. But even afterwards, like 1 or 2 every month. Bigger shows usually. And, you know, it's so weird being this far removed now from the start of COVID. When COVID hit, I had on my Ticketmaster account alone, which is here in Canada and I mean the US as well, it's pretty significant. But Ticketmaster is the main platform for large shows. So if you're going to an arena or a stadium for a show, you are probably using Ticketmaster. And it's all just like electronic tickets now, of course. I had 7 shows, all but one was refunded. And the one that wasn't refunded is Rage Against the Machine, who I get to see in July this year. Super hyped about that. My second favorite band of all time, of course, in Rage Against the Machine. But tonight, I was kind of reflecting on this because I was worried, you know, when I bought these tickets in like November, and at the time, like things were starting to close again, and it was like, what's going on? Since then, I've had a booster shot. I had my 3rd vaccine dose, and I'm, you know, reading the news and stuff, just trying to put together my feelings on where we're at with COVID, where we're going. And, you know, like tonight, I can be in the arena without a mask on. Now, it's kind of far for us to get downtown and difficult to get there around 7 p.m. because of rush hour and stuff from the direction that we live in, unfortunately. So we have to take the subway, the underground, the TTC, if you will, downtown. So, but we have to wear a mask on the train. But you don't have to wear a mask literally anywhere else. And it's kind of weird, right? Like I said, I was kind of worried when tickets first came on sale because I was buying tickets because we've been talking about, we've been planning to go see Billy Talent, and they're literally from like an hour away from where we live, maybe an hour and a half. So they play a lot of shows in this area. We were just talking one day and it was like, why have we never been to see Billy Talent? Like, let's go. So then when this tour was announced, like, okay, we bought tickets. And it's now this strange position where I feel personally like I have no issues with COVID whatsoever. I mean, I'm triple dosed. So if I do get sick and I'm 27, the likelihood of me getting ill is like really ill is so low that I don't know why I would be worried about anything. If anything, it just gets me a few days out of work. Well, I guess I'd have to work from home, but still, it's kind of like at this point, it's almost a benefit. And then you don't have to worry about getting sick for the next 3 months at least, depending on how long your antibodies last. But then today, actually 59 minutes ago, there was an announcement from the government of Ontario that they are going to be making eligible a fourth COVID-19 vaccine. Of course, starting with individuals 60 and over, and then obviously they'll scale it downwards over time. And that's probably individuals 60 and over plus people with health issues, I would assume. Although they actually haven't directly announced that, but that's the way they've always done it. Now, I have a problem at this point with the way things have been handled because I got my third vaccine dose more so because I just didn't want to have to give a fuck about where I was going, who was I with, am I sick, what's happening, am I going to die? Like, I'm the kind of person who's like, I hate needles, I hate vaccines. I talked about that on the podcast. If you go back to the first episode, I tell you about my I have an actual phobia, and it's really bad. And so for me to have gone through like 3 vaccines that were completely optional, it was a big deal. And it was at the point with the third dose where I didn't really worry at that. Like, I wasn't worried anymore. I got it in about January of this year. I wasn't worried about getting COVID and dying, but it was more so, you know what? I got the 2 doses back in the summer, and there was a big wave that we were in the middle of. And it was just like, fuck it. I'm just going to get the vaccine. It's going to protect me. Stop bullshitting that it protects other people, because it doesn't. It's going to protect me. But now looking at the option for a 4th dose, I mean, the numbers right now in Ontario are really low. So today, the moving 7-day average is 1,300 people. And that's 1,300 people over 7 days. So the total amount of, per day rather, but there was a huge spike recently. And it seems like that's what's happening. There's another spike in COVID, but no one's talking about it because we've all kind of realized at this point that the virus seems much weaker than it was before. Most people are vaccinated. If you're not vaccinated and you've already been sick, then you don't have to worry about it. So the size of the population that has to worry about COVID is much smaller than it has ever been before. And in the future, like, it's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. We're seeing right now major lockdowns in China because a significant portion of their population what is both unvaccinated and never had the virus, right? Whereas for us, like, so many people have had it and so many people have been vaccinated that either you can't get it, or if you do get it, you don't have symptoms, so it's harder to spread it. And, we're kind of we're kind of through the thick of it. That seems to be what most experts are now saying, is that the heaviest impact has come and gone. It's always possible that the virus will come back in another way that's, either stronger as far as a risk to in people's health and well-being, like it's just a stronger virus, or it spreads far easier. It seems right now like it is spreading very easily. A lot of people are getting it. It's also important to note that these numbers that we're seeing, 1,300 people per day as of April 5th in Ontario, those numbers are people who are actually getting tested in a location. And I know of 2 people recently who were not allowed to get tested because they didn't work in like a healthcare facility or whatever, and they didn't need it for some form of travel. So it was basically like, no, just do the at-home test. If it was positive, just do your thing. So there's probably a lot of people sick with COVID again right now. I don't know that we should worry about it. And this is coming from the person who from the very beginning has been covering COVID and was telling people early on that this is going to be a problem. And, when sports leagues were saying it's not going to be a problem, I did an episode saying, yes, it will. You are going to have, I thought they were going to have, they were going to lose attendance because people would be sick and not attending games or whatever. I didn't think they would actually shut down. I didn't even think it would be this bad, but I've always said it's going to be bad. At this point, it's now kind of the opposite. It's like, you know what? We still have to keep following these rules. The rules are in place for various reasons, which for the most part I actually disagree with, like wearing masks on public transportation. The thing is, it's not like you're not allowed to wear a mask anywhere. There's nowhere where you're going to walk into and they're going to be like, take the fucking mask off. That's not the way this is going down. And so if you always have the option to wear the mask, that seems like a fair way of doing things. And like tonight at this concert, right? It's in an arena of about 25,000 people or so. Maybe it increases closer to 30,000 with floor seating. But, somewhere between 20 and 30,000 people. And you have the option to wear or not wear your mask. And for sure, there's going to be people in the arena who have COVID. Like 100%. It's everywhere. Will you necessarily get it? No. But the possibility is there. So, wearing a mask is totally up to you. And I think that's the way it should be at this point. There shouldn't be, I've seen judgment in both directions. I've seen people judging people for wearing masks and judging people for not wearing masks. And in both circumstances, I'm kind of equally irritated with people. I actually know of one situation where someone was approached. He was wearing a mask in a grocery store, and a woman actually put her arm around him, and she was not wearing a mask, and leaned in really close to his face and told him that he needs to free himself. And, it's a beautiful thing that he can now see her face, and she wants to see his beautiful smile, and like all this weird, like, shit that you should never say to someone randomly in a grocery store ever, but let alone in this circumstance. And he was like, he freaked out and like pushed her away and was like, what the fuck are you doing? And, whatever. The thing is, like, it goes in both directions. I know people who have literally gone up to individuals not wearing masks and been like, you're killing... Well, I know people who have not been wearing masks and had this happen to them. Like, you're killing my son who has cancer and all this weird shit. And it's like, no, cancer is killing your son who has cancer. Like, I suppose the treatment for the cancer is what would kill your son if you're referring to COVID, because that's what weakens their immune system. But anyways, it's just like, you can't have, like, both extremes are not real in this situation. I understand the feeling of government suppression and, take the masks off and free yourself and it's thing. Fine, that's been done, right? On the contrary, the idea of there are people who cannot be vaccinated and cannot get COVID. I'm sympathetic to that, but those people always have not been able to get colds. They haven't been able, like, if you get a cold, it can kill you. If you get pneumonia or a flu, it can kill you. And we've always spread those things everywhere and never had to wear masks. We have to get back to that point where it's like, okay, I understand that. You and your family need to be extra cautious because of the unfortunate situation you're in. However, you cannot place that burden on me. You can't place that burden on everyone else, because it's like, just because there are starving children in Africa, that doesn't mean that we don't eat here at home, right? The two issues are, although they feel like they should be related, they're actually not related. And there is, I mean, first of all, wearing masks minimally stops the transmission of the virus. Very minimally. So much so that there are actually experts in both Canada and the US that have come out and said that mask wearing should actually be not implemented, whereas proof of vaccination is the thing that you should be checking for in businesses if you want them to be safe. Obviously, nowadays, to get into businesses in both countries, there's no restrictions like that, like either of those, but there was a time where you didn't have to wear a mask, but you still had to prove, you didn't have to prove vaccination, but you still had to wear a mask. Well, all the experts were saying that's backwards. That's not the way it should be. The mask is not an effective way of controlling the virus. The vaccine is. And so, it really, what it comes down to is we can now look in hindsight at this horrible situation that everyone was placed in. And it was surprising to everyone. I mean, really, it came out of nowhere. No one thought this was coming in this capacity, globally impacted like this. But we now have hindsight. We now are preparing for the possibility of these things happening in the future. Now, statistically, it's not going to happen for another 100 years, so by that point in time, they'll probably be like, it'll never happen again. But, that would be my great-grandchildren or whoever the hell would be alive at that point in a century or two. But, Canada announced that they're expanding funding into these sort of resources for the future. Obviously, the U.S. has been stockpiling these personal protective gear and stuff like that, and maintaining a budget to keep that on hand. And research into viral control and stuff like that has been happening. Ways that we can improve hospital infrastructures and doctor's office infrastructures and whatnot. All of that is now being researched and looked into. So this is actually one of those things that I think in the modern day, it's going to end up being a positive thing as far as preparedness is concerned, because in the technological era, we haven't been faced with any struggles like this. And now, of course, the war in Ukraine is posing a huge threat to us, but I think for global impact, the war in Ukraine will certainly impact Russia significantly. But it seems like food shortages as well are going to be starting soon because Ukraine is not exporting any wheat this year. Their fields have been basically destroyed by Russia. But I think for the technological age, we really needed something to show people, especially young people, which I would include myself in that there is a false security in life in the Western world. We look at other places that are horrible. I mean, some of us have visited the countries that, just they have like for kids to go to school is like, oh my God, right? Like 1 in 5 kids get to go to school or less. And, their teachers are people who have like the equivalent of a grade 3 education here, but to them it's considered high school or college even. And it's crazy, right? The the level of education that they get in some places. But it's always been looked at like, well, we are slowly improving those areas and we are extremely comfortable here and nothing can go wrong. Well, there are things that can go wrong. Sure, when it comes to security, we're definitely protected by our allies and our nuclear capabilities and whatnot. Sure, but, things can pop off at any minute, right? Ukraine has been at war for a long time, but Poland, for example, right now, right, 5 million people have emigrated from Ukraine, and about 3.5 to 4 million of them have gone through Poland. Some have stayed, many have left. We don't really know exactly what the number is, but 4.5 million people just surged across their border. It's one of those things where, of course, here in Canada and, relatable to the United States, a country I've spent a lot of time in, and we're very similar. Like here in Canada, the only borders we share are the US and Russia. And with Russia, it's literally the fucking North Pole, quite literally, right? You can't walk across it. There's an Arctic Ocean as well that you'd have to, it doesn't even freeze in all the way across. Like there's no way to cross into Russia. You can't walk it. So we don't have border issues like that here in Canada. And even in the US, the issues that we think about are vastly, vastly understated in comparison. Now, what would happen if war were to break out in South America, right? Because South America is far more volatile than Europe. Could you imagine a country like Brazil or, Venezuela right now is like falling to pieces. Well, what if Maduro, the dictator instituted in Venezuela, decided he's going to do something in South America and start attacking these smaller nations and just sending everything into chaos? There's no sign that that's going to happen. Not like there was in Ukraine compared to Russia. But I'm just saying, if that were to happen, what would happen if, millions of people, in 2 months walked into Mexico and then we're just at the U.S. border? All of a sudden, it's the problems that we think exist are like, holy hell, this is nothing compared to what Poland's dealing with right now. And obviously, at this point in time, these are refugees. They don't have the right to vote and in whatever countries they settle in Europe. They don't, nothing like that. But they may one day. Right? So that voting power is huge. Think of the amount of people who fucking hate Russia. Fucking hate Russia. It's not, yes, they hate Vladimir Putin, but they hate Russia. Are they going to be voting in favor of any government that has any sort of support for Russia? Right? Hungary right now just elected a man who is like very close friends with Vladimir Putin. Well, what if Hungary takes in a bunch of these refugees? I haven't actually looked at the number, but if that were to happen, this guy would never be reelected, right? If by the time these individuals can vote, which in 4 years they may be, because it's 3 years of, or at least in most places, you get 3 years as refugee status, and then you need to apply and figure shit out and whatever. And if they become citizens, right? Jesus. That's huge power. Now, the one thing is that needs to be said, the reason that they are okay accepting all of these people is they are European individuals. Like, people can say what they want. They're like, why aren't you accepting people from the Middle East? Well, it's a completely different world. It's a completely different world. It's like South America to the United States, really, and Canada, right? Like, really, it is so different that the way people vote, the way the products they purchase, the food that they eat, all this stuff is so different that it is far more impactful on a voting system to allow people to settle as permanent residents or citizens. Because remember, a permanent resident in many places, if they have a child in your country, will become a citizen of that country. So it is extremely impactful when you allow these significant numbers of people to move in. And, you just have to be honest about it. The reason that the Middle East and individuals from the Middle East are not being as welcome into European society is they are two vastly different societies that they built for years to establish and maintain. And, you know, a country like Canada, we have this really weird system that as other nations come here, they're actually cool conforming to it for whatever reason. I mean, honestly, like, I have friends who come from everywhere, who all of them and their parents, their families, they're just down with the system. For I don't know why, but our system has this weird thing where it actually doesn't really impact voting and stuff like that because of whatever background factors are implemented and included. Whereas in the US, the opposite is true. Whereas people coming to the US have openly state that they want to make changes to the US political system. Maybe it's because the Canadian system isn't as talked about. And so immigrants that come here, like, they vote if they become citizens and they certainly go and vote. I know my grandparents did when they became citizens, and that's everyone's right. But in the US, like, they're voting in change. They're electing people at the local levels who are implementing active change in policy. And then there's this act that's typically on the left, and then on the right there's this active movement to stifle that change. And we see the same thing in Europe. It's huge right now in France and the UK. There's this active battle between immigrants and longtime citizens. We don't have that here in Canada. Jagmeet Singh is a Sikh man. His family immigrated here some decades ago, and yeah, I believe he was actually born in Canada. But either way, like, he's the the leader of a major political party, and, like, it's not a thing. Like, no one gives a fuck. Like, he's wearing a turban and speaking English and French, obviously, in the debates. No one cares. It's just like, okay, like, it's literally a non-factor politically here, and it's kind of why I really like living in Canada, because truly, like, your race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender, and where you come from, all that has no impact at all politically. No impact on your vote as an individual. It has no impact on your ability to run for office. I used to live in a city when I was going to school, and one of our local candidates had a very thick Indian accent. He was elected, and no one cared. There was no like, political ads being like, he can't even speak English. Could you imagine in the US someone who had a strong foreign accent running for office? Like, that would come up. It would be like, what if you can't understand a conversation? You know what I mean? Like, they would say that shit, which is obviously not true. Like, if you're fluent in English and you studied at English universities and you have a whatever, like, master's and PhD in English courses, like, you could fucking speak the language. But in the US, it's a problem. And so I just want to point out that, like, if trouble was to happen in South America, the impact on the US specifically would be so great. They could not do what Poland did. It wouldn't be possible. The citizens wouldn't allow it. And I don't know what would happen in Mexico. Mexico would collapse, right? We would obviously be trying to support Mexico financially and whatnot, but they couldn't withstand a quantity of people a quarter the size of this, like 1.25 million people just walking into Mexico in whatever we're at, 45 days. Like, man, what? I can't, like, the fact that this is happening right now in Europe is so mind-blowing. And it's at least, it seems like they're diverting their attention to the eastern part of the country. It's horrible what we're seeing, obviously, if you've been watching. I don't really have much to say about it, but in Bucha, a northern neighborhood of Kiev, it's actually about as far outside Kiev as I live from central Toronto. So I'm not really in a Toronto suburb, but the suburbs of Kiev are very sprawling, and it's about the same distance. So it would be like my city here being attacked and left the way that it was. There's bodies that have been in the streets since March 18th. They lied in the streets until about April 2nd. You know, people assassinated in the street, non-military with their hands tied behind their back, evidence of torture, people shot in the knees and the lower extremities. You know, like, I mean, I could get even more graphic than that for the methods of torture that have been proven and documented. So it's just like, what the fuck, man? Russia is just, these are the sorts of things that no matter how the conflict turns out, I don't know how you rejoin the world. I don't even know how you can rejoin China and how China is going to be willing to stand with you, because these sanctions and everything aren't going away. The U.S. is still ramping them up, even though they pulled out of Kyiv and everything. Like, the Western world's like, no, fuck that. Like, we're not allowing this. And they really aren't allowing it. And they're doing all that they can. I have heard people who are seemingly upset about some of the stuff that's been going on with sanctions. There's been one particular expert who's been going around talking about how they're not working. I'll reiterate, I vehemently disagree with that. And I am an expert in finances, and no, I mean, I disagree with you. I think that, as well as politics, and I think the two things combined, when you are making a population broke, you are going to turn them against their leaders, because it is their leaders' fault. And many people in Russia recognize that, just as we would here. If all of a sudden we're all going broke, we blame the leaders. And that's what's happening, you know, at the populace level in Russia. Now, does it make the citizens do what we would do here and, you know, off with their heads? Maybe not, but we have to start the process, right? You have to start the process of change, and no, you don't have access to our economies anymore. That's the punishment for doing this, and that will help to deter countries like China, India, and not that India really has a vision of grandeur of conquering, you know, the Asian world, nor China really, but it sends a message that, like, this sort of thing is just not accepted. This is bad behavior. You are now on timeout. And this might even be like a teenager. You're grounded for a week, and a week economically can be 10 years plus. You know, if I was reached out by our member of parliament to say, hey, when do you think Russia should be released from these sanctions? I would say they should not. Ever. Done with it. You're not allowed to do that. It doesn't matter if someone else comes into power or whatever. You need to beg your way through, and then you need to pay reparations to Ukraine. You need to pay reparations to the countries in Africa and Northern Africa specifically, who are suffering from wheat shortages, and all their people are going to, not all, but they have people who are going to starve and die, and children are going to starve and die because Ukraine can't send wheat to these locations. That is your fault. You have to be responsible for all of that long before we can even think about re-welcoming you into the global economy. And I think that is what's being done. That's the way that most of the world is viewing this. And, you know, Russia just gained Hungary as an ally. As I said, their new leader is good friends with Vladimir Putin. But, you know, what ends up happening there? I don't know. I think that this is a major L for Vlad. This is a big loss. Even if they end up just breaking off the eastern part of the country and whatnot. I mean, fine, but they should have done that from the start, which is what everyone was always saying. They could have taken that in 2 days with the military power they had. That's what we thought they were going to do when we knew about on Sunday, there was that planned thing where Putin was going to say, we won, we did it, whatever. All of a sudden they go after Kyiv, and it just, what a fucking joke. Like, it really is. It's an embarrassment for Russia. And yeah, I don't think anyone's concerned with them at all. They have no economic power. Their dollar, the ruble, is worth nothing. And obviously they have no economy, and they have no good military. They just have some nuclear weapons that who knows if they can even hit their targets, because sheesh. They have been missing some targets. or at least they claim to have missed some targets. Either they intentionally hit some apartment buildings or they vastly missed their targets. We don't really know. But yeah, I think that's where I'm going to leave it for today. I have a concert to prepare for, so I'm pretty hyped for that. Pretty stoked. I hope all the listeners out there, especially if you're in Canada, that you're getting out into the world again, because I know the American listeners have had it good for some time now. Hung out with Adam the engineer, actually, who came up from, he's living in the States now. He came up to see me not too long ago, and they're able to travel and live life for months now. So I was jealous of him at the time, but now it seems like we're getting there. So I'm really excited to go to a show tonight, get some normalcy back in life, and hopefully you are too. But thanks for listening to the podcast this week. Thanks for tuning in until the very end. Of course, my name is Jacob Paveo, and I am grateful for your listenership. If you haven't done so already, you can hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to share the podcast with your friends and family. You can follow me on social media or use the contact page at laughtolearnpodcast.com. Also, don't forget you can hit up the merch store there over at laughtolearnpodcast.com/store. Lots of cool items available. Yeah. And otherwise, I just realized, actually, I don't think people can buy anything from the store right now because I changed my credit card information. Huh. Interesting. I got to update that. Don't buy anything at the store this week. Wait for next week. I gotta fix that. This is one of those things when you're doing a podcast and like a small business operation like this, a lot of stuff just gets missed. And that's what happens when you have a personal credit card, because it expired. So I got a new credit card number, and who knows, maybe it'll move it over. I don't know, I got to look into it, but just be careful if you buy something at the store. It might be rejected. It's a complicated process. Anyways, thanks again for tuning in. Don't forget the podcast airs each and every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And also, don't forget to keep on laughing and keep on learning.